Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
And welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics with Chris Hanna and Christopher Tanner. We were just talking about duck faces and stomping poppies before the show started.
Yeah, when your Instagram influencing starts damaging rare flowers, you've lost me. You're just done. You're dead to me.
It's like the people that go around in Holland. Holland does tulip time every year in Michigan here. And it's a big thing, you know, like
it's cool.
In this area.
It's real cool.
And I think it's a little over-exaggerated, and it really bothers me about what the school system. My kids get half days every day, so if they're not in anything, it sucks because they're at home. It's like, go back to school. Go back to school. I don't want you at home. But you know you
should be learning, not looking at flowers. This is heresy.
And heresy. But it's anyway, it's a neat time for the kids, and it's a cultural thing. That does leave out a lot of other cultures, unfortunately, but it is still kind of a neat thing. But there was people that were going around videotaping themselves chopping down tulips.
A couple years ago, some people got arrested. They were driving along the side of the road with the door open when they took all the tulip bulb heads off.
You know how much the fine is per tulip head?
I don't know, probably like $100 or something.
Yeah, it's like $150 a tulip head or something like that. Because they have to have the fine so high, because it's like, hey, stop doing that. Stop ruining property for no reason. It's not funny. Yeah. You know.
This is the old white guy podcast. Get off my lawn! Don't damage my flowers. Like, I mean, I get it, because if you think about it, like tulip time. If you're in West Michigan, you know that's a big deal. But I didn't know this. But there are people from like Japan that like fly to the United States for the Traverse City Cherry Festival, for Holland and the flowers and the tulips, and they go to Frankenmuth and eat the chicken. Like, these things are so blasé and like whatever to me, having lived in Michigan. But like this international space for tourism in some cases for some of these events out there, and like they're flowers. But for the other people throughout the world, like tulip time is a big deal, man. Like, we're talking thousands of dollars. Hundreds of thousands of dollars are probably going to your city just from tourism and like bodies being in the city.
Yeah, and it's awesome. And now think about it: if Holland was smart, if they were smart, they would allow head shops to sell legalized marijuana. Because if you can imagine, all these other people are like, "Hey, I can come over here and I can get high and go to the tulip festival. I can get high and look at flowers." I mean, come on, those two things go hand in hand, you know.
Dude, talk about it. Like, if they had a joint, like a vending machine at the Meyer Gardens, so you could smoke weed and then go watch the butterflies fly around in the garden or in the greenhouse, it'd just be like, man, like, I don't know, that would be like, there's all kinds of things that the legalization could be a really cool thing in this state. One of the comedians, we just finished Laugh Fest up here in Grand Rapids, and one of the comedians that I heard yesterday, because we went out and saw someone, is he said that you guys are in a weird place. It's legal, but you can't buy it. So if you got some, it's cool, but like, you can't sell it. And so like, he says you guys are in a weird gray area still. And I was kind of thinking of that. Like, that's kind of where we are. So like, we have a bunch of conservatives and like uptight citizens that are like fighting tooth and nail, and all the cities that are super conservative are banning, you know, those dollars from coming into their town. And you know, it's just like everybody's picking sides. And so we'll see what happens when they finally get all the bureaucratic red tape figured out, so that you can go to, you know, a liquor store or a head shop or whatever it is they decide is the proper dispensing mechanism in Michigan. So maybe there will be, right next to the little girls selling their Girl Scout cookies, there'll be, you know, the boys in high school that are selling their marijuana cookies or something. Like, maybe that'll be a food drive where that money will go to something cool, like the Girl Scouts does. I mean, can you think of that? Like, if there was like pot cookies that the kids could sell.
So I've actually seen one that are Girl Scout cookie-ish and have a big leaf in the middle, and it says, "Not what you think," and you're like, that's funny.
No, that's the stuff that they've been banning. In places where it is legal, is the stuff that is like overtly candy looking. So there's like the same idea of like Smoking Joe, where there's like at a certain point, this is becoming just like super, like, I guess, appealing to children, like bright colors and colored mascots and stuff. And I can understand that. I can get it, because like the same thing with vaping or whatever, like all the cotton candy and bubblegum flavors or whatever, like it's really accessible to children. Like adults like those flavors too, but like I could be okay with just like on that. Like maybe we won't make the bright and shiny cookies or whatever.
I'm going to disagree with you, because think of it this way: how often do you walk into a liquor store and there's a flavored vodka when you're 12, and get away with it buying. And there's flavored, candy or flavored alcohol. I'm sorry, flavored alcoholic vodka. I mean, okay. How about this? My first, when I first started drinking more regularly as a teenager, it wasn't beer, it wasn't whiskey, it was flavored rums.
Yeah,
Mike's Hard Lemonade.
Yeah, the little like sky blue malt beverages and Mike's Hard, whatever.
I mean, so I get the logic.
Yeah.
And you know what? I actually am okay if they want to ban it in supermarkets. Leave it to the liquor stores, leave it to the cigarette stores. Fine. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That's a compromise. I don't need to walk into a family fair and go, hey, there's a pack of gummies. Oh, they're 30 milligrams. Oh, good. I know what that dose is. Oh, $20. Okay, thank you. I'm okay if for a number of years, if I need to go and actually get it at a specialized store, I'm fine with that. It's silly, but I get it.
Yeah, it was like when they got rid of Smoking Joe or whatever. What did they do? They tested children all over the country, and the only cartoon character that was recognized by more children than Smoking Joe was Mickey Mouse. He was number 2.
Yeah, and I get it.
And so I don't know. It's just like some of that stuff with letting that all that kind of stuff change and see what's going on. The comedian was talking about it. He's just like, you guys are kind of figuring it out still. Like, I'll come back here in a year or two and I'll buy some joints from you guys, basically, or whatever. It's like, I'm just curious as to like what the growing pains were in places like Colorado and Oregon, and see where we are stacking up, if everybody's really being overly conservative or not. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. If you haven't checked us out on Facebook lately, we've been posting more articles. I don't know why we use Facebook, but we do. And so if you haven't, you should go over to facebook.com and follow us. We do post links that we talk about from the show, or other links that we haven't been able to talk about in the show, for articles that we'll just say just didn't make the cut. I mean, there's enough. We'll put it this way: if somebody paid us enough money, we could have a show every day and talk about all these articles and things like that. But that's, you and I, Hannah and I have, other responsibilities. We don't expect people to pay for us. If we ever got syndicated or somebody picked us up, great. But until then, any of the articles that we don't talk about in the show, or things that we talk about in our personal lives, we post them on the Facebook wall at this current time. We don't have a better outlet, per se, to post something that quick. So if you haven't been over there in a while, you should go over there and check it out, and make sure you like the page, follow it, and then you'll start seeing more things come out about the show. Another thing that we have coming up in the works is next week's show, we're bringing Abby Smith on. And if you don't remember Abby Smith, go back way to the beginning. She is, at the time, she was a PhD candidate. Now I actually believe she has her doctorate. And one of the big things she was studying was like an HIV vaccine. So she's actually going to come on next week, as long as weather permits and all the other stuff, and talk about vaccines with us. So that's going to be fun, because we haven't had her on in a while. So, and she's very enjoyable to have on, and a big fan of the show. So It'll be very exciting to bring her back on next
I
week.
can't wait to hear some of the stuff that she was working on for her PhD too, because she said she had some really cool things in the works, and she was hoping it would change the way science basically is done with viruses and vaccination research and stuff. So, I mean, I didn't see her on the scientific journal when it go viral, so I'm assuming that it went well, but I don't know if it was like groundbreaking. So maybe it is, and she just hasn't been able to release it yet. I don't know. I can't remember when she was talking about it. It was super exciting, so I can't wait to talk to her about some of her work as well.
Yep. So for this week, we decided we wanted to start the show off, I guess secondarily start the show off, talking about Trump's budget plan.
Yep.
And in the description, in the description, you're going to see hundreds of links. Maybe not hundreds, but lots of links. More than we usually post for a segment section. And one of the big things was, I wanted to do this last week, and we had planned on covering it, but everything was so new when it came out that we hadn't had time to fully dig into all of the details. All we had was just what the media was posting. Hannah and I actually were not able to dig into the actual budget and talk through all the different things that are going on. And it's some of the discussion I wanted to have tonight was let's look at the budget a couple different ways, right? What is one of the big things that Trump always harped on when he became president? There's too much spent.
Yeah. Basically the deficit and the debt.
Yeah.
He was hounding about both those two things, like every other Republican who has also been claims to be a fiscal conservative yells about. The debt's too big and the deficit's too large.
And so I actually want to look at that, and there's a way to look at a trend. And we're only going to touch on this in a high level. I mean, we're not economics majors, but we do have a little bit of experience in this, and we have done quite a bit of research on this specific topic. And if this is the whole show, it's the whole show. If not, we have some other things planned. It kind of just depends how much we can flesh out.
Yeah, how quickly we can dig in here and go through some of this stuff, because like some of this is it might drive in a little bit more of a conversation when we talk about things that we know that we can relate to, because one of the ways you teach is through relating life experiences and things that so talking about some of this stuff, esoteric numbers, it's going to be kind of like but we might have a story or some way we can relate some of this information to more of like the average person's experiences.
Yeah. So some of the program, we'll start with what it proposes, right? So it's a $4.7 trillion budget plan for 2020. And there's a lot of things to dissect in there. One of the major highlights is $8.6 billion for barriers along the U.S. and Mexico border. Now, it doesn't specify what type of barriers. It doesn't get into detail whether this is a quote-unquote wall, but it almost feels like I didn't get my way, therefore I'm going to stick it in the budget. Well, that money's got to come from somewhere. It's got to come from somewhere. So on a high level, it looks like he's slashing several social programs that benefit lower income people to have a wall. Maybe not the exact wall he wants, but it's a wall. And it's like, dude, when are you going to stop and actually understand that, hey, hold on a second. You've been rejected. You tried to put a national emergency together, and then now here we are, a month later, and you're now trying to push it in through the budget. Seems a little silly to me.
Well, it seems like he's kind of double dipping. So the initial point when they talked about the tax bill is they said that they were going to have a $2 trillion savings. And then they also said there was going to be they said that there was going to be $2 trillion in economic growth. And so they said they were going to cut $2 trillion from the basically the budget, from the planned budget and planned spending for 10 years, and then that would be covered by that economic surplus of stimulus. And then they also said they were going to be using $2 trillion to spend it in another place. I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically they double dipped. They counted it twice, and there was a bunch of economists that were saying like you can't do that. And we're looking at a bunch of plans and programs that are underfunded. And in this thing here, they're doing the exact same thing. Trump had the declaration for the emergency at the border, and he's pulling money from inside the executive branch to try to pay for that. But he's also including a bunch of this stuff in the from the budget proposals, and some of this stuff is connected to that emergency funding. This is what I'm doing with this money, but some of it is just he's just cutting other things. So one of the things he ran on is he'll never cut Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. One, because those are the things that they're kind of locked in. Like, you can't really do that without congressional approval. And Paul Ryan always wanted to dig into that, but Trump is basically talking about removing some of those funds, and on top of that, still being able to take some funds from the executive branch. So he's looking at double dipping this $8+ billion from the budget, and then getting more money from the executive branch, because, like as John Oliver said, this budget proposal for the initial budget proposal for the wall of something like $2 trillion, even though Congressional Budget Office said it was going to be $10 trillion, and then Trump kept walking it up, and then in the end it was around $15 trillion. So he's got 8 from his executive branch and 8 that he's proposing to pull back from the budget here. So like he's closing in on that, what it might actually cost to do it, the heavy duty way with the concrete and everything that they were talking about. So I don't know if he's trying to go that far, because the Trump method is basically to try to reach and overshoot like an insane amount, so that when he makes a compromise, it seems like he's being nice, but he's still getting a good deal. And that's kind of his capitalistic way. And this budget is typical Trump fashion when it comes to the way he proposes and tries to make deals.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, we even threw an article in from Fox News, and normally we wouldn't do that, but even Fox,
they've been critical.
Even Fox News is saying, "Hey, hold on a second,
slow down, man.
I don't know if we agree with this, and it's kind of funny because I didn't expect that out of Fox News, though I guess lately they've been
Shepard,
a little bit moving closer to the center for Fox News. Yeah,
what's that guy's name from Shepard Smith from Fox News? He is, he's conservative. He's not a centrist and he's not a liberal, but he does he has some journalistic integrity. On Fox, he calls the president out on some of his, sketchy stuff, and he calls him out on, full-on falsehoods. Every once in a while, you have to give the people, maybe that Fox organization isn't the best, but there are some people in it that are trying to do the right thing, and that's nice to see. It's nice to see some form of ethics coming from Rupert Murdoch's cronies.
Yeah, of all things, right?
Yeah, I know.
So the budget plan is 150 pages according to my PDF.
Yeah.
The link's in the description. We also posted the link from last year's budget proposal as well. And I'll be honest, I kind of want to go back and read Obama's just to see if the wordings are different. Because some of me wonders, what is Trump writing? Like, one of the headlines says, major savings. And you just kind of go, okay. And then it says, analytical perspectives. And you're like, yeah, that's not a Trump thing. He would never say that. But, some of the wording in here, it feels like he's writing some of it, or like he's like, no, I want my words to be this on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of times when Trump is basically doing it, so this is it's a really short, it's not even a tangent, but it's a really cool thought that I had today. So I was listening to an interview on NPR for Fresh Air, and they were talking to Martin Scorsese, or no, they were talking to Francis Ford Coppola, and they were talking to him about The Godfather, and they were talking about the way in which they structured the language, how people said, what they said. And they also talked to the author of the original Godfather series, Paulo. I can't remember his name, but I've never read the book, and I don't remember. I've never heard of the author's name, but I did know that Coppola was. They were interviewing about it, and he was talking about the way that the Sicilian tradition of language is basically to not say anything specific and locked down, so that you literally could not be incriminated in law. Everything is kind of insinuated. It's all hyperbole. It's all metaphor. And it's just like, that would be terrible if something bad happened. And like everything that they're talking about is like that, that's the New York rich, thing, which is like, to not lock yourselves down. And that's how Trump talks. That's what he does. So my assumption is that what he does is he gives all of these strange ultimatums and all these things, and they kind of have to be interpreted and pulled apart by guys like Nick Mulvaney when they're doing the budgets. And so like he gives them the general terms, and then they'll give him what is obviously like a Cliff's Note or something, because there's no way he gets deep enough into these to know 100% what's in there without, like a slideshow or something, because they've had multiple things where they've said that he doesn't even read intelligence reports unless they have, they're condensed and have his name in them or whatever. So these budgets, 100, what did you say, 150 pages? So these are lawyers writing this stuff, and he's basically telling them what he wants, and he's assuming that they're putting what he wants in there. That's another thing. He's actually trusting these people to put the specifics that he would be okay with. That some lawyer's not going to look in, and in the end, Trump will get in trouble if somebody who writes this makes a mistake and makes this huge problem or error. It's he has to trust these people to do this stuff.
Yep. So the first department is Department of Agriculture. He's decreasing it 15% over the year before.
Yeah, and he's basically been attacking them with the tariffs, and he said what did he give, like $12 or $20 billion back to them, but the amount that he has hurt them for with the tariffs and including to this reduction in subsidies, this is a net loss for the farmers that voted for him.
Yeah, and they're they had $100 million and $500 million for AFRIF, right? Which is a different research initiative, and he's cutting it $50 million. Yep, I'm cutting it down to $50 million. But I'm. And
what's that doing on the budget? Like, what is that helping? Like, in all reality, like, as big as this thing is, like, $50 million here, $20 million here, it's $4,750 billion budget. What's that $50 million going to do? Yeah. I mean, really, a little slice of the cheese.
Yep.
Cut the freaking military.
There you go. The Department of Commerce supposedly is going to go up 9.3% over last year, and he says the DOC ensures fair and secure trade, provides data that empowers, informs American businesses, blah blah blah. So essentially, here's the deal, folks. I'm going to issue these new tariffs, and we're going to see all this revenue, but I need a 9.3% increase over last year. So they essentially want to add $1 billion to the budget because I've initiated all these tariffs. Now, here's the deal. That increase is nothing. So this is where a lot of people don't get into the minutia. In fairness, if we increase our tariffs and we were seeing a larger revenue return from that, then at that point, if you increase the budget a little bit, if you spend a little bit more money to get this, that's okay. That's actually how business works.
That's an investment with high return. That's the whole point of doing business, is you want to invest a certain amount of money and get more money back.
Exactly. If you go through his budget, now you would think that would be something that you would put into this, right? Inside of here somewhere, you would say this is how much the tariffs are coming in. There's nothing in his budget. And I guess, again, we can split hairs and maybe you don't put that in there. But that, to me, that would be the largest selling point right at the top. By the way, even if it's a fake number, like he likes to throw out, because he's like, it's a fake number or it's a real number. And you're like, no, it's not. Yeah. We know you're fake.
Well, this is a proposal. Like, this isn't an actual, legal document yet. This is his initial proposal that has to be approved. So he could do that. That's not a problem for this document.
Yeah. So the question becomes, where's our increase from tariffs? Where's that number? And I asked this question a lot, and I'm getting nothing back. And essentially, again, it goes back to like the border thing, is tell me specifically here where we're going, where this is going to help. Demonstrate how it's going to help. You did tariffs. You haven't shown me where the money's going to come from. Because in fairness, if tariffs increase and it could pay for the border wall and that didn't have to come out of the budget of anybody else's, fine. I agree with it. The next
It's not. They have one of the issues with this administration is that they don't use data, because anytime they have data, it usually contradicts what they're trying to do. So a lot of these things are zero-sum assumptions that if they do this, then this. But when they make those assumptions and then they submit that to people who are statisticians, who are economists, and they're just like, no, this worked when the United States owned 80% of the world's manufacturing right after World War II. But we don't live in that world anymore. So you can't do this. You can't use a 1961 method to try to control the economy. It doesn't work anymore.
Exactly.
And so like they don't have any data to back it up. And so they say these things and they propose these things and they don't have the data there, because if they did, it would almost exclusively be of people who are unreputable. Like you don't want to put a scientific journal together that has the guy who said autism is given to you by taking vaccines, because that guy's been rebuked and basically chased out of science. Those are the people that the Trump administration will be able to get together. The people who say that global warming is fake and they have a PhD in, I don't know, philosophy or something, and they're trying to give you information on whether or not there's global warming from human, based contributions to the environment. Like, these are things that people will be like, this is not something that you can use as evidence, and that's what Trump has to do. So they just don't include it, and they just say that we're going to do this, and this is going to be the result, and that's it. That's all I got to give.
Yeah, exactly. And it's ridiculous. So let's move on. The next one is the Department of Defense. They get a 5% increase, and you're like, oh, okay, hey, no big deal, right? A 5% increase, but guess
5%
what?
5% of what?
$718 billion. They are asking for a $33 billion increase. Now, this is what's interesting in here. It literally says the budget also sustains efforts to deter and counter rogue regimes such as North Korea and Iran, defeat terrorist threats, and consolidate gains in Iraq and Afghanistan through a resource-sustainable approach. Now, just that sentence right there. He just met with North Korea, couldn't get anything solved. Now we come back and want more money for the budget. like I don't know whether he just is that big of a failure when it comes to negotiating peaceful, resolutions.
We didn't spend nearly as much money worrying about direct North Korean aggression until we escalated into this tit for tat, threat to threat. And then we gave them all kinds of deals when we took away the military plans that we used to do with South Korea. There's been a series of wins for North Koreans. And if you take away some of the stuff that the United States has done when it comes to Iraq and Iran, taking away the nuclear deal, which most people think is going to actually cost you significantly more money and decrease our sway and power, because they're basically, as soon as the Europeans are out of Iran, they're not in a deal with any kind of economic growth, the Iranians are going to go directly back to making weapons, because that's going to be the clearest way to gain respect on the world level, because that's exactly what Kim Jong-un did. And now he's meeting with the Chinese president, he's meeting with Russian president, he's meeting with the American president. I don't know if there are really any bigger ones out there than those guys besides Brussels. So, I mean, if you want legitimacy, build nukes, thanks to Donald Trump's message. And all of those things, when it comes to your cost and spending, on foreign policy and everything, like, the military isn't going to fix that stuff. That's diplomatic stuff, and we've reduced those costs. And in multiple places throughout this, there's reductions in diplomatics, investments, and increases in the traditional military. But Trump campaigned on, we need to end all these forever wars. We need to get all of our soldiers back. I don't know if you remember that. We're going to bring all of our boys back home. I haven't seen a lot of that. He brought people back from Syria and then retracted like 1,000 times over that. And then another thing that he's basically talked about is bringing it back to the Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, is that he's proposing something in here on open-ended federal contribution to Medicaid, which he would give each state a market-based healthcare grant. They're talking about lump sum per capita allotments that would be $1.2 trillion over 10 years, so $12 billion a year. And Congress rejected this idea in 2017. This was Republican-led Congress, by the way, when Republicans proposed it, because it would essentially cap Medicaid payments at a fixed level. It would not keep pace with rising healthcare costs. So, like, we're not even, we're giving more money to the military, and he is doing things that the Republicans rejected in the past for healthcare, and so essentially we're attacking the agriculture. We're trying to limit the spending in Medicare, and Medicaid. So silver hair, Medicare, underpaid Medicaid. So the poor people in this country on Medicaid are going to be looking at a reduction in the healthcare coverage because of this proposal if it gets approved. He is attacking all of the little guys, and he is funding these big military machines. I don't see a lot in here that helps the people who voted for him. That's one of the things I was looking for, searching through here. Is that where's the help that for the Midwestern coal miner and the Midwestern farmer, the people who watch the country music awards and wear MAGA hats. Where is their help? And I haven't seen it. And it's like I'm just waiting for like the outcry. I don't know if it's going to come, but this proposal and this new budget doesn't help them either.
Yeah. And so, looking back at that budget, right, we talked about the increase. And this is the best part about it, he even mentions the budget supports the creation of a new branch of armed forces.
Space Force?
Space Force! I'm sorry.
You forgot.
No, he didn't forget.
I honestly thought you forgot about that.
Nope,
I didn't think you remembered.
It's in here. That's the best part when reading through this. Like, there's things that you could chuckle at, and there's things that you're like, I want to ugly laugh at this. This one is genuinely funny. He's going to support Space Force. We don't have an enemy in space, but he wants to create something. The only reason he wants this, right, to me, is so that he can A, say he was the first president to do it, and B, so he could put like terror, so we could become United States terrorists, right? So we can be like, hey, see that satellite in the sky? It's really not a satellite. It's like a death ray. By the way, Syria, you do what I say? See that? You see it up there. You can't
if you think about it, one of the reasons we have the whole non-aggression treaty for the whole planet in space is that as soon as you start putting weapons on satellites and someone gets grumpy and shoots down something, I mean, with a couple of well-placed, you don't even need explosives. You just a well-aimed projectile shot out of a satellite to blow a hole right through the center of another satellite, and you take down half of the GPS grid in Central Europe. I mean, there's like massive things that can happen, and we don't need that. It's like the amount of time, money, and effort science has put in to giving humans the communication tools, and we're actively trying to weaponize and potentially create a war that would remove those tools from the advancement of the human species. Like, it's just really frustrating to see an active attempt at devolution. Like, they're trying to take us back to an ignorance bubble time where you could hold people in a tiny little space. This is one of the things Dan Dennett always talks about. It says religion has to evolve, or it has to it'll basically go extinct. And this is something that I don't think he really thought of, is that the ignorant people who have lost their power, who can't keep people in these little bubbles anymore, they want to just destroy the new things and take us back forcefully. And there's people trying to do that. I mean, they really are. And this kind of budget here that essentially takes away from education, from science, from all of the progressive things, and tries to just basically keep the money in a small, it's kind of like a capitalistic, the money gets concentrated in the same couple of things, and money keeps growing. It keeps expanding like a virus. The defense budget expands like a virus, and we have to take money from the other portions, the Democratic and the progressive sections of the rest of the government. And you lose the whole point of having a government, and then it just becomes this massive military. I don't know. It's this weird slippery slope thing that I'm worried about. And like everybody says, it's the democratic process can slow this down. People will stop, and they won't approve this thing. I don't know if this budget will be mostly disapproved. I really don't.
Well, I think it will. They essentially, both sides have rejected it off the slate. But I think an interesting thing here. Let's go back for a second. Let's go back 2 years. His proposed budget for the Department of Agriculture cut 21% of their budget that year. Right. Mm-hmm. We go to the Department of Commerce. Was a 16% decrease. So that's good. That's different, right? The Department of Defense asked for a 10% increase overall. right?
Yeah.
So the
because
Department
the
of
year
Defense
before that,
can,
Obama's defense budget had dropped it like 15% or something. Like he reduced it for the first time down to below 600 million or billion, I think it was. And the Republicans were angry about that. And so there was a big increase to that first budget from Trump.
exactly. And but again, you just look at it, it hasn't stopped. If you look at every budget, you'll see right there.
Fiscal conservatism.
Department of Education, same thing. There's a decrease there. This year,
I think it was $7.1 billion DeVos wants to remove or something like that.
this year it's $7.1 billion, a 10% decrease. 2 years ago, it was a 13% decrease. Now, again, this is just a proposed budget. This doesn't mean we don't go over or under budget. Like, we haven't even gotten into that side of it yet. But when you look at all those things and you go, you're seeing a trend here. Pay more for military, pay less for education, yet tell us somehow we're going to remain on top of the world. It makes no sense to me. You're going to do it through, fighting. Department of Energy.
Or you could increase taxes, and then you could take all that money that you're cutting from those funds, and you can, if the Republicans were smart, they could increase taxes. They could take that money and keep all these programs exactly where they were, and then add some more to the defense funding. So they wouldn't piss off all the people that are currently angry about losing money, but they would be able to add money to the pet project that they all want. It kind of makes an argument for them to tax a little bit more, so that they won't get, they'll be able to pass the budget. But even then, they can't look at, poor people and uneducated people and sick and old people, and they can't just go, you know what, no. Taxes are too much for that.
For the Department of Human and Health Services, they want a 12% decrease over the year before. This is the one you were talking about. That's
abortion world, man.
It's not just abortion world, but
I know.
Inside here, it says the budget proposes a mandatory health savings, reducing long-term deficit. So they're going to reduce. It's a 12% decrease, right? So that they're saying that's 12% of whatever 87 billion. So it's what 90 something billion or something like that. That 12% decrease is going to help reduce budget deficits. Now let's transition a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you think the budget deficits have been over the last couple of years?
Well, before we even do that, let's do the difference between deficit and national debt.
Okay, good point.
Yeah, because that's one thing that a lot of people argue about. And so, in simple terms, this is a link just from moneyandhowstuffworks.com. I just pulled it up real quick. In simple terms, a budget deficit is a difference between the federal government spends and what it takes in. So essentially, the government is spending so much money, and it's bringing in money from taxes and from abroad. And so the national debt is known as the public debt, and that's the result of the federal government borrowing money to cover years and years of budget deficits. So in order to you run a deficit, meaning that you spend more money than you bring in. And then if you have a national debt, that means you borrowed money to cover that deficit. So every year that you spend more money than you bring in through taxes, you have to take a loan out to cover that difference. If you balance the budget, they say, it's when your spending meets your income, and you're good. Bill Clinton was the last president to do this. And that's mostly because of the dot-com bubble and because of some crap that he just happened to be on top of. But since then, we've basically had a national debt every single year increasing. And as far as I know, the last 2 years have been the largest. I know last year for certain, for 2018, was the largest increase in over 10 years. So, I mean, we're not seeing this turnaround in overall spending. I'm
stop you for a second there. Clinton's not the only one that has been under. He's the last one.
He's the last one.
He's
the only one since 2000 that had that.
Yes. Between
Obama, Bush, and Trump, there have been no budget surpluses.
Yes. Nope. And that's fine. I just want to make sure we clear that up because
he's
not the only one. I may have said
it incorrectly, but in my head it was right, but maybe my face didn't say it.
Yeah. And I'm scrolling through here.
So we've got deficit and debt now. So you were going to go in from there.
Yes. And so when we talk about that crushing 12%, right? That they're taking off there. Let's look at, let's say, the last year. and they only have an estimate, but we were at a 4% GDP deficit for the year. And he's saying he's going to take 12% of 87 billion. Well, our deficit was 890 billion.
Mm-hmm. So we had $890 billion more that we spent than we brought in through taxes.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that, right? If you think about that 4%, and I don't even want to, I'm not going to compare this specifically to Obama at this specific time, right? We can get into that in a second. But when you just look just at that number, and he's saying, I'm going to reduce it. If you look at 12% of 87 billion, that's roughly $10 billion. Well, that's nothing compared to the $890 billion deficit, right? Mm-hmm. That's nothing.
Yep. The only way that you fix those things is you either decrease spending or you increase taxation. And, I mean, this is not difficult economics. It really isn't. And so the guy coming in and saying that he was going to fix all those problems and he was the best businessman and the best budget maker and the best business deal maker and all that kind of stuff. Like, these are simple things that a really good businessman would attack immediately, because one of the things that you look at when you're running a business is you make it profitable. This is the opposite of profitable. It is. And you and I both, we have difficulty dealing with some of the, the centrist spending when you don't see that spending coming to the people. I have no problem with a government that is incredibly profitable as long as if it's running a deficit or if it's running a debt, that the average people's quality of life is going up, because then you're spending your money well. We're not seeing any changes in that. We're seeing the spending go up, but we're not seeing any difference in the quality of life at the bottom. In fact, some people it's getting worse. So there's no deal making or really impressive thing that he's been doing here. And this is another example. 12% of nothing is still nothing.
Yeah,
it's just
he's taking 12% of the education budget, which was I lost that number.
Well, for this year is $7.1 billion, and that you said it was 13 or 14%. Last year, which a little bit more. I mean, either way, you're reducing those numbers. You're $870 billion, and you're pulling out, $7 billion just from education alone. I don't know. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul, but you're not changing anything major.
Yeah, because you're increasing our defense spending 33. So not only have you not decreased just by looking at those two numbers, you've not decreased anything. You've actually created a larger deficit because you're not taking away where we're spending the most money. That's
if you're trying to decrease the deficit, you cut stuff, but you don't add anything anywhere else. Like, that's kind of the rule. If you want to reduce the deficit, you have to cut things, but you can't add spending anywhere else. You can't add money to the defense budget if you're going to cut little slivers from all the other things. Like, you're going to negate everything. And so the whole point of cutting the deficit and cutting the budget, everything has to lose, or you can't gain anything, you can't add anything, whatever. I just don't understand why that's so difficult. Like, the defense budget at 700 or 677 billion, whatever it was last year, I think that's enough. I don't think it needs to get over to the $718 billion for this year, but all the cuts that you had for everything else, you can reduce. You can say that you did the reduction that you claim that you're going to be able to do, and not increase the defense spending. But he wants to increase defense spending because that's the executive branch, and the executive branch can then take money from the executive branch and move it to the budget or the border wall. He wants to be able to reallocate all of those funds, and so there's all kinds of things that I think he's trying to do, which is it's classic for his business. If you look into what he's been doing, and we'll find out a bunch more in the near future when potentially his taxes are finally revealed, is that something like $400 and something million was bequeathed to Donald Trump from his father's estate, and none of that was taxed because of all kinds of crazy, wild schemes to get that money where it was supposed to go. He knows how to do this. He has people and lawyers that have done this for years and years and years, and so that's what I think he's trying to do, so that he gets a political win from a border wall by essentially moving 1,000 garbage pieces around, and then we lose track of everything. And enough money gets lost and goes to the border wall that he's looking for. My assumption is that chaos that he loves to sow is what he's trying to do with this budget. Is just break everything, and then he'll sneak away with some money.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, just the defense budget for Veterans Affairs is a 7.5. No, it's an increase. He's right. No. It's an increase. It's 7.5% increase of $6.5 billion. That just eradicates your defensive or your education budget. They're neutral. Yeah. And so the one place that we have is called balance.com, right? And it's essentially wagering what 2020 will estimate, right? So if you take their numbers and look at your deficit, we went from 2018, a 4% deficit, to like a almost 16%, and then in 2020 it'll be a 14%. So you have actually increased our debt to income ratio 3 times in 2.5 years. Now,
that's Democrat spending there. Like, I don't know
exactly. And that's not even exact Democrat spending. If we go and look at what Obama did, Obama took office in 2008, and he was at a 3.1% deficit for the year. His highest deficit after the Stimulus Act, and this is not Obamacare, this is the Stimulus Act, was
where he gave everybody in the country $600 or something.
Yeah, 9.8% deficit. 9.8. That was the highest in Obama's terms. By the time Obama left office, he was down to 3.4%. 3.4.
3.4% deficit.
Deficit. Yep.
So for the total income of all the taxes, he was spending 3.4% more than that for the total budget.
Yep. And here's the deal. He started, his first year was 3.1%, right? And in fairness, in 2007, when the
whole planet melted down,
when everything melted down, they were at 1.1. So in his career, he only increased it 2.3%. Now, I'm not going to say that's good. I want to make sure we understand. I don't agree that that's good, but within his first year to his last year, he stayed almost even in 8 years. He had a 0.3% deficit increase by the time we were done. So, yes, he did increase our taxes. He did pay out more money, but he also found a way to reduce it. Whether I agree with it or not, I'll be honest with you.
Some of the ways that he did that, some of the ways that he spent that money, like he spent the money in the opposite direction that some of the Irish did when they had their bailouts. So, like, the banks failed in the United States. They just failed, and we bailed them out. And in some of the European countries and Irish banks, they just let the banks fail. They just let them collapse and disappear. And they found that when they bailed out the people who lost their mortgages and they helped them, they found that they actually saw a quicker market turnaround than obviously it's a smaller country, but a small case study. In the United States, we saw much slower turnaround for the average person who lost their money, and companies like GM who lost the pensions for people who had basically banked on having that retirement. That money was lost in the GM bankruptcy. The U.S. Bailed them out for, but they didn't bail out the people who lost their retirement funds. They didn't bail out all the people who houses got foreclosed on. They bailed out the rich guys at the top, and there's a difference. And so we've seen an increase in income inequality. So that spending, it turned out to be good. The U.S. economy did stabilize, and we saw the longest sustained growth trajectory in, I don't know, as far as I know, since the Great Depression, with Obama and Janet Yellen running almost 8 years of steady growth, because Obama was so low right from the beginning that he had nowhere to go but up. But I mean, steady Eddie growth. And Trump has seen the last quarter saw the first significant reduction in job growth since the early Obama years. So there's been a bunch of things that have been going on that maybe you and I don't agree, or maybe we do agree, just kind of how Obama spent the money and who he bailed out. But we've seen all these claims from Trump saying that he was going to fix all these horrible things that Obama did, and he's actually spending more money. So the idea of fiscal conservatism for Republicans is only if there's a liberal in charge and he wants to take that money and give it to the people at the bottom. Fiscal conservatism, when you're in charge as a Republican, usually seems to be giving the military and the executive branch and big businesses the biggest deals of their lives. I think that's pretty straightforward. Its budget's another example of that.
Yep. And the last article that we reference is actually from a conservative think tank / libertarian think tank, right? And they have a lot of
which is
really,
important. We
really,
need to bring in people we don't usually like.
Yep, and I really like this one because it does not go out of its way to say, well, I think this is dumb, blah blah blah, kind of like what we're doing tonight. But
Yeah,
maybe. In fairness,
a little bit.
But in fairness, it looks at and it actually takes and breaks it down in different ways. For example, it breaks down, and again, this is from a conservative think tank. This is not a liberal progressive
this isn't
think
CNN.
tank. No, this is not CNN. This is not this isn't even Fox News. This is more conservative than them. Our defense spending is equal to China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, India, France, UK, and Japan all together, plus a little bit more. Think about that.
I have a reason for this too. I'm curious what you think. I have a theory as to the reason why. I don't know. What do you think?
Well,
what do you think the reason why the U.S. does it?
Well, earlier you said it so he could divert money. So
yeah,
that
could be it.
There's some of that. The other side of it is so that it's an easier point of control. Mm-hmm. If you can kill people a lot faster and mobilize a lot more, you're able to conquer things in a different manner. We may not have the amount of people that, let's say, Russia does, but we have the ability to mobilize them, to put them in a position, to put bases in, to have higher level technology than other countries, and that gives us an advantage if we need to ever impose our will on countries.
Yeah. Okay, so Russia has 144.5 million, which is roughly half of ours. So we're a little bit bigger than them. But anyways, they have a bunch more landmass. Anyways, I really think that this is the United States. If you can imagine the Greeks or the Romans or the Persians betting on, what would be the best way to control the rest of their territories as, let's say, the Industrial Revolution was happening. They would bet on their weapons. They would bet on their guns, their soldiers, their weapons of war, and they would get left behind by technology. The United States is betting on Cold War tactics to keep them as the lone world superpower. Listening to the news today, I heard people saying that China is challenging the U.S. as a world superpower in 5G. This is the new technology that'll be bringing in, 1,000 times faster, air quotes, right? 1,000 times faster download speeds for mobile technology, which I'll believe when I see it, because people tell me that my Sprint 4G LTE is fast, and I lose connection when I'm just standing in my parking lot. But the United States is betting on, traditional weapons of war. And I think weapons of war is going to be intellectual and digitized and information and data driven in the near future. It won't be about the number of people you can kill. It'll be about the number of lives you can control and destroy digitally. And I think that the U.S. is going to get left behind. They're going to spend so much money making tanks and airplanes, and they're going to have this antiquated and like what we think of the Russian Soviet technology right now. We're going to have that, and the Chinese are going to look at us and laugh and say, "Look at their old analog business controls. They're still using stuff from the 1980s in a lot of their cities to control their their voting systems. Like they're simple. They're old, and I think that's what this is here. Is this is the U.S. betting on ancient and old school technology that'll just leave them behind completely and totally, and they're just not keeping up with what the rest of the world is doing. And that is the Republicans' perspective on science and advancement. The centrist Democrats isn't much better, but I think this budget is a clear example of cutting things from the areas where you're going to get scientific innovation and growth. I know the Pentagon is usually a major source for growth, and we've talked about this, but I don't even think they're spending too much on research anymore as far as these types of things. I really do think it's going to be a big deal in the future how far we are left behind. And that's the reason why I think we're going nuts on the spending to cover China, Russia, and all the other majors.
Yeah, and that's like the same thing with healthcare, and we can move on from this topic in a minute. But the healthcare is the same way. We spend way more money on national healthcare, and we don't even have universal healthcare than other countries do.
And we have worse outputs in some cases. Yeah. Some cases we actually have worse health. Like we spend more money on worse care. That's insane. It's like paying double for an old used car.
Which is what we're doing right now too in the United States as well.
I know.
Maybe we should take some of the defense spending and start phasing out these older cars for people that can't afford them. Get some newer cars with better gas mileage, more green technology. Oh, I'm sorry. Shoot, I sound like a socialist now.
Well, no, my father said that. I told him, I said, I think it's so cool that in the future, maybe if you live in a metropolitan area, maybe not rural, maybe not in the rural areas, there'll still be, manually driven cars, whatever. But I think it's really cool that in the future in metropolitan areas, that the idea of owning a car would be like this huge waste of space, time, and money. I think that's awesome. And he's like, I will never not own a car and have, the freedom to drive wherever I want it. It's like, there's I got
soon you won't be able to, Father.
well, that too. Like,
I
didn't have the heart to tell him that you're going to be dead by the time that stuff happens. But the idea of like manual, wasteful. It's like the idea of the number of cars on the highway with one person in them, 2,000 pounds of steel, burning dinosaurs to drive you to work and stuff like that. Like it's just really terrible when it comes to efficiency. And so like there's all kinds of things that are really awesome that like they may be different. And in our quick saves, we're going to talk about something like this, changing the status quo for me. And like, I don't know. I think that's awesome, and I think that's that the idea of conservatism versus progressives is like we look at the unknown future and we think of it in wonder and awe and excitement, and some people look at it and they think of like we're gonna have to change our culture. We're gonna have to allow people in that have diverse and different views, and we're gonna have to stop spending money on nuclear warheads and maybe spend it on communal growth and increasing quality of life. Like that's an unknown, but I think that's way more exciting than making bombs. I don't know. It's just me, I guess.
It's just you. It's just me. And it's at least half the country.
I think so too. I really do. I don't know if the average person would want to spend money on bombs if they could get their kids vaccines and healthcare for the whole year. I think they would pick that.
It's just like there's a guy I was talking to on Facebook, I guess not talking to, but commenting back. They're in one of the cities. They're talking about they're having a meeting whether they should allow sales of marijuana, right? And this guy's like, absolutely not. They shouldn't. This is a waste of everybody's time. Go voice your opinion on why you wouldn't want to. Goes on these whole rants, has like 3 or 4 paragraphs worth of shit. And then at the end he goes, well, the only positive is when my kids smell it and ask me what that smell is because I have to smell it everywhere now, which is ridiculous because you don't smell it everywhere. But whatever. And he was like, well, it's just how I tell them how to smell an idiot. And it's like, whoa, man. Like, I know that maybe you don't support it. And then so, I was like, well, it's legal. So what are you going to, well, nope, the federal government says it's illegal. So therefore I can morally stand on my high ground and tell my kids that it's an immoral act because it's illegal. And I said, well, what do you talk about slavery at one point, man? At one point, slavery was legal. Now it's not. So are you going to...
And slavery was used to balance the budget in the South. 2/3 a person, right?
Exactly. And it's like, what are you going to do? Tell your kids that, it's illegal and then turn around two years later when the federal government, like, decriminalizes it? What are you going to do? Like, say, well, I was wrong? No, you're going to still stand on your soapbox. And he's like, oh, it's just these idiots trying to, get more taxes out of us. And I'm like, if you don't smoke it, you don't have to pay any more taxes. Hello? Like,
I know. It's the same thing. Like, I don't pay the lottery tax. I don't.
No, I don't either.
I don't pay the lottery tax.
Once in a while,
that's. I mean, yeah. I mean, I bet you in the entire year, like my family, when we do birthday gifts or whatever, we'll do when it's like not really a gift, like my dad doesn't. You don't do gifts for him. So like something like a gift card, something you think he'd be cool with, or you can give him a couple scratchies. My brother-in-law will have $500 last week. His wife bought him some scratchies. Happy birthday. $500. Like, I don't know. That's cool. But it's an interesting way to spend $5-10, whatever she spent on scratch off. So, but you don't have to pay it if you don't play.
Yeah. And and that's the thing, and that's kind of what I said too. He's like, well, the taxes, and it's like, well, you don't have to. You don't, if you don't smoke it, you don't have to pay the taxes. It's pretty simple. Like, and
you can say no to fixing the roads. Your road that you live on won't get fixed. We'll fix all the other roads if we use that tax money to fix roads.
Well,
we'll leave your road full of holes.
And that's what I said. It's like, well, technically speaking, you're right. Not everybody supports this, but the majority of Michiganders did. And he's like, well, that's exactly right. The majority did. I'm not one of them. And it's like, I get that. And that's when I said, well, technically the majority of Americans didn't vote for Trump, but here he is because of a law called the Electoral College, right? So the Electoral College essentially says we get Trump. I didn't vote for him. I don't want him as my president, but here we are. And after that, he's like, you're just dumb. I was like, all right, thanks, buddy. Like, we'll just move on from here. Says the guy that says, to take the Trump, how much you hate Trump test, take a paper clip, fold it into a U, and stick it in a light socket. He has this meme, and he's on the fire department, for Christ's sake. And you just want to be like, look, dude, maybe you should get a not public health job. Maybe that's what you should do.
Well, I always loved. There's a guy that he's always talking crap on our Facebook page, on the Cellar Door Skeptics page. He loves to make fun of the fact that we're socialists and whatever. He's a firefighter. So I haven't. Every time he makes a big comment, I have like to sit down and write you have to take a moment to really put something good together to break up or put a nice insult together, because if you don't, they'll turn it around on you and make you look like an idiot. So if you do respond, you got to be good at what you got. And I just hadn't had the time. But like, it's Andrew Klein, I think it is. So if he listens to this, screw you, dude. Anyways, he's a firefighter, or he posts all these pictures of firefighters and stuff. It's like, so you have a problem with big government, big spending, or whatever. Do you want to take away your firefighter's pension? Because that's a really good pension. Got a problem with that? I mean, that's federal funding. That's tax money going in. That could be, weed money. That could be alcohol money and tobacco money that's helping pay your retirement. Social spending, right? You're providing a social service, and taxpayers are paying for that. Would you prefer to have to go out and fundraise so that you could be a firefighter and get paid? I don't think so. I don't think that would be what you would want to do. And so, like, I mean, all of these kinds of things like go into, you see a lot of this in like those traditional jobs. It's like you're a government employee and you're hating on big government. There's an interesting piece of doublethink or a cognitive bias there that I've just never really understood. But those kinds of things show up in the budgets like this here, where we're looking at, the budget's too expensive. We spend too much money. We should increase our government spending in defense, but we should remove our education bills. Like, you're not helping the deficit or the debt. You are increasing them both, and you're taking away children's education. Like, where is the benefit there? You want to bring the soldiers home. You want to end the wars. You're giving the government military more money, and you're taking away from your kids' education and possibly even your own salary if you're real hard enough. I don't know. There's I try to understand it, but at some point you kind of just have to deal with your just voice your opinion with your votes and don't get sucked into the black hole.
Exactly. Yeah. Use your voice to vote. I agree 100% with that.
Woo!
Well, if you haven't been dissatisfied with the Trump budget and you enjoy it, maybe this is the wrong show for you. Or tell us why what we are interpreting is wrong. I would love to see some numbers that I guess support some of this stuff. Or if you're really
just fine with increasing the deficit and the debt. I assumed that conservatives would want to bring it down, but why is this a good thing? So let us know.
Exactly, and I'm courting, I guess is a nice way to say this, a somewhat agnostic individual. He's not really a Christian. He's not exactly an atheist, but and that's a whole different discussion, but he's a conservative. And he essentially originally offered money to debate somebody on why Trump's the best president. So I am working on seeing if I can get this debate, and we're looking into whether we should host this live or not. So Hannah's
like
going to
live as in like
a live show. We'll do a live
humans.
Yes.
In person or live
no.
on
just on
live on the internet.
Yeah, on the internet. I'm not gonna. I don't need two people at my house yelling about how much they love Trump and how much they hate Trump in my living room. That doesn't go over good for family dynamics here.
It does. If anyone has a venue and they would like to have a socialist, semi-socialist, socialist, anarchist, whatever the heck we call ourselves, and you will put us in a room that has some kind of space and chairs for other humans, let us know. We would love to do something like that. But if it comes down to it where we can get a live thing going on here, would this be on our channel or their channel?
Ours.
Ah, well, I think it would be cool. We'll see if we can make it work out and see if anybody else wants to hear it.
Yep. So if you do, let us know. If you could really host a live one, that'd be great. I'm not going to wager on that. I'm just saying. We're looking at doing a debate, another debate format. That's not me or Hannah. It's going to be two separate people, and we're going to moderate this. It'll be a conversation-style debate, but I'm working on putting that together, and hopefully I should have some answers in the next, couple weeks. And I thought it would be fun, right? Cool. You're going to hear two people that are not us debate something we agree and disagree on, right? And I thought it would be a good thing.
We could be moderators. Essentially, we would just ask tough questions to both candidates, because I would bet that we could probably ask some tough questions to a progressive candidate that would frustrate them a little bit too. I think we're far enough left to be able to even to be aggressive towards an anti-Trumper in some cases.
Yeah. So as we close the show up, we have our favorite part of the show, the quick saves. And this week I thought I'll go first this week. So if you don't know what our quick saves are, every week is just a little tidbit of knowledge that we thought, hey, I'm going to read that later. Boom, click it, save it, share it. And so here we are now sharing what we felt for the past week that we would like to share with you. So the first, my article is from bbc.com.
And I read it, and it's awesome. I read it before you even added it in here. I knew about this. This is so cool.
Death metal music inspires joy, not violence. And,
yes.
and if you've listened to the show before, you know of my love of death metal. And if you listen to any of our pre-shows at all, or post-shows, you'll randomly hear me play some crazy music nobody's ever heard. Like, for example, at the beginning of this episode, I actually play a song from a band, and we were talking about how Hannah can't actually hear the ultimate intelligent music coming through, and it all just sounds like gibberish to him.
I'm not certain if it's my hearing aids or my taste, but we'll dive into this and analyze it scientifically.
We will, and I think that would be fun. But anyway, so obviously I have a love for metal. I like a lot of music, but metal usually always comes around home. It's something that's a catalog, and last Saturday we had to lay a high school buddy of mine to rest, who happened to be in a couple of local death metal bands. And so I've been on a death metal kick over the last week and a half, and I found this article, and I was like, I cannot not share it. And so the idea behind it is, they talk about this. They say, I've had one desire since I was born, to see my body ripped and torn. And you go, whoa, okay, hold on a second. That sounds pretty...
That's romantic.
Yeah, it sounds pretty bad, right? and they talk about, does this inspire violence? Does death metal and some of these extremely angry lyrics actually inspire violence in people? And while I won't
so
say
the
that
argument about Columbine, right?
Yeah, to some extent, yes. And while I will agree with you that people can become violent when they hear this music, I've been to a Hatebreed show before.
I know. I was just thinking that. Like, I love Hatebreed, but those guys fight a lot in the audience.
They do
in the audience.
And so I wanted to know, what do the scientists say? And so this is kind of somewhat of a paradox. And so the scientists have done sensitivity testing on violence, right? Now, I won't say this is like some super in-depth scientific. This is our quick saves. This is not.
Yeah, I bet you their funding was a bit limited. I'll go out on a limb and say that there wasn't a whole lot of government money behind this, and they were limited in how deep they could go. Like, their sample size is probably not 100,000 people.
No, it definitely was not.
Just to guess. But I mean, they're on BBC.com. They're on there. This is not like just some little tiny little study. This is enough that the most trustworthy news source in England ran the story.
Yeah. And so they talk about, if you were to be given, a happy song versus a non-happy song, a violent image versus a non-violent image, which do you gravitate towards more? Which does your brain take in? And so they say, if fans of violent music were desensitized to violence, which is what a lot of parent groups, religious groups, and censorship boards are worried about, then they wouldn't show this same bias. But fans showed the very same bias towards processing these violent images as those who are not fans of this music. So think of it this way: okay, one of my all-time favorite bands is Slayer and Cannibal Corpse, right? I mean,
yeah.
Christ's sake, I had to explain to my 6-year-old why there's a skeleton pulling himself off of a throne of dead bodies. Okay, yeah. I have a shirt. It's a Cannibal Corpse. It's
all the Cannibal Corpse imagery is just nasty. It's awesome and nasty.
I've had to explain that to a 6-year-old, my daughter, before, right? Yes. I was asked the question, why is the skeleton coming off? Why is the spider eating people's heads, Dad? I mean, there's different things. We've had to have these conversations.
Those are the parent problems from what was it, the Wonder Years, right? That's what they taught us about that we're gonna have to deal with. Is it why is the guy's head falling off, Daddy? Like, that's what they were gonna ask, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because we've had those conversations and we talk about it. And I said, well, while all of it is just this fantasy, honey, it's not that I actually want to see a skeleton ripping itself out of a flesh throne. I don't know. That might be actually kind of cool, but I mean, in reality,
if you saw in real life that happen to a body, I bet you're empathetic enough that you would probably not enjoy that.
Well, I could take Game of Thrones for example, and I'm rewatching that, and there's a part. Spoiler warning, for Christ's sake, if you haven't watched season 3, I don't care. At this point,
no, but spoil it. I don't care.
Where a guy, loses a prominent member of his body. And I could tell you, you don't see it. You don't actually see it, but you know what's happening. And if you've read the books, you specifically know exactly what's happening. And it's just, I hate that guy. He was taken, but he was raised by somebody else, treated very lovingly, came back, conquered, killed off the 2 boys, did all these horrible things to the place that he grew up in. And he's kind of getting his just desserts to some extent, right?
But you still reacted negatively.
I still feel bad for it because it's like, okay, that's just pure torture, man.
That's what they're testing. It's like, if something violent and kind of unnerving and yucky happens, is your natural reaction revulsion towards that gross thing, or like, oh, that's cool, whatever? I don't know. So basically, they're showing like these murder images and what would be considered controversial or I guess threatening to some people, and they're showing happy kitty pictures or something. And so like the reactions are almost like they're what would they call it, the control group, which is basically like a bunch of NSYNC fans are like, nah, dead bodies, and then most people who are metalheads were also like, yeah, no, I don't like the pictures of the decapitated corpses. Like, this isn't a good time. And they thought that it would be a little bit different. And so the reactions for both groups were relatively the same. So they're saying that, metalheads aren't these like violence loving, macabre, gore horrors or whatever.
Yeah.
That you've heard. So they're basically saying that we're still people, even though we like metal.
Yeah. And essentially, and again, before we move on to your topic, I have a friend. He grew up watching violent movies since he was very young. Very big into metal. Basically, he only likes metal. Usually more extreme metal than even I do half the time. And he has not once killed somebody. He's broken up. But I've watched him break up fights. I've watched him go out of his way and help bums on the street. I mean, he's literally sat there and had a conversation with a bum for an hour and a half. More than I would have. Lent him cigarettes, bought him a beer, and basically said, hey, I know people don't treat you like a human, but here you go. Why don't you come to the bar? I'll buy you a beer as long as you're willing to walk out with me and don't cause a scene. The bum walks in. He bought him 3 beers. Bum walks out. We walk out. Bum thanks him. Now, he's tried to scam money from us even after that, but, still.
We did the same thing at a restaurant, and the guy went in the bathroom, and he did drugs or something because he came back just incoherent mess. So sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. But, it's just basically, it's the thing that he did. Like, he's a metalhead, and he did a good thing for someone and didn't have any trouble with it, and that's awesome. That's the kind of guy he is. And so if someone who was, like, I don't know, one of Betsy DeVos's cousins saw him walking on the street in, his whatever metal shirt, and like that guy right there would probably punch a baby. And like, she's wrong. She is just thoroughly and completely wrong. And this kind of study would support that people that you would think of goth and metalheads are actually good people that react to violence and pain and, things that are kind of creepy the same way.
Exactly. The article ends by saying this. I would be frankly astounded if anybody listened to that song about eating humans and then felt a desire to be eaten by a cannibal. That's exactly right. I don't think about somebody bludgeoning my eyes out and sacrificing my dog to Satan and think, that's exactly what I want to do with my time. Is it cool? Do I want to watch it on a movie? Absolutely. Do I want to get drunk and yell and scream and get my aggression out? Absolutely. Do I actually really want to take my dog or your dog or anyone else's dog and sacrifice him to an invisible fake god? No, not at all. So, I don't know.
That's a pretty good quick save, man. I saw that. I didn't pick it, but I saw that earlier in the week, and that was a really cool story. My quick save is the next step in human evolution. Humans are having sex with robots. We're doing it all the time. We're just getting started, but it's happening.
Are you?
No, I'm not.
I'm not either. So.
I don't have the funds for that early adopter technology. So that stuff is not cheap. We have a guy that we interviewed on the show, E-Ray Oscaral. You can take a look at ERAY. We did an old episode early on when we started off. He's in Turkey. He's kind of a controversial figure. He's in artificial intelligence stuff, but he is always talking about this kind of evolution of humans and robots and relationships. And there's a human simulation robot that's really cool. It's got facial animations. He's always posting stuff about it. But recently, anyone who knows this is going to be a little bit graphic, but whatever. The company that makes the Fleshlight made a new, which is basically a male masturbation toy object, and they have significantly upped their game. They were using the human skin analog material when they first started, and now they've got like mechanized things. So this video, I just clicked on it because I thought it was funny, and they were talking that Fleshlight has a new commercial, and I was like, there's no way there's a Fleshlight commercial. There's just no way that could be on TV. And it's like this, this science fiction guy flying a ship that looks like the what was it? Ambiguously Gay Duo's car from Saturday Night Live, which is like a big phallic ship, and then like at one point it extends its length even further, calling itself the Maximus. And the docking ship is like obviously the woman, and it penetrates, and there's all kinds of ridiculous porn language and everything in it. So like the whole thing is very sexual and overly done. But what it is an advertisement for an insert that goes into their mechanized, motor-driven, battery-powered masturbation tool that has a rest for your phone that you can set it on it, and you can control the length and the stroke and the way that this thing stimulates the male member. And like the entirety of it is like, wow, that's getting really, really, like, it's getting very complex. I'm looking like there's a lot of motors. They said that when the battery is fully charged, you can have an experiment or an experience that'll last 60 minutes long. Like, first off, that's a long time for anybody who's manually gratifying themselves. 60 minutes that's a luxury, but in the end, what they're talking about is essentially the melding between man and technology, or humans and technology, because these technologies, while slow to be for women, they're there. And it brought to mind that video is my quick save. And then just real quick, we added the link in as well. There's a I think it was on the 11th of this month. It was the NPR show Hidden Brain from Shankar Vedantam, and it's Love, Sex, and Robots. And it goes into this changing relationship between humans and sex robots, or human analogs, where essentially there's a sexual revolution happening, and it may not be in the direction that most people think it will be, as the sexual revolution made sex okay and something that you could do for enjoyment in the past. Now it'll be where you don't have to have sex with humans. You don't have to have that traditional family structure and have kids and, become part of that whole expectation cycle. So there's some really cool things that are happening. I think they're cool, and we talked about earlier, is like progressives like to see as new technology and unexplored future places as interesting. This to me is interesting. I mean, I took the traditional route. I've got 2 little kids now and a wife, and it's wonderful. But I do think that it's cool that humans are able to also do other things, and I thought this was pretty cool. Even the YouTube video is it's a bit ridiculous for most people, but if you get into the NPR podcast, you'll get your intellectual stimulation as well.
Exactly. I don't know. I think it's a little weird. I'll be honest with you. Like, it's a little weird to me.
Well, like if you were single and you had the money, if I was completely and totally single, I had this big giant house to myself, and there was no shame where I could just like play with these toys and see this stuff, and I had the money laying around. I'm not ashamed to say that I would check it out. I always thought the fleshlight ideas were cool and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I'm not weirded out by that, and that part of sexuality isn't weird. I think it's pretty wild that you're getting like batteries and all kinds of motors and cell phone mounts going.
Yeah.
And then there are like the full body, like anime looking girls in Japan that have like moving parts, and like they talk to you. They're learning machine learning AI stuff. So like there's a lot of things that are happening, and the Hidden Brain thing talks a little bit more that more human like stimulation. But like,
so you're
it's
like
just that
Dennis from It's Always Sunny. You'd have like a whole closet full of them. You activate one, you'd be like, "Yep. That's I want Cherry today. Today, Cherry and we're gonna have a good time."
Whatever works, man. I don't know. Like the whole idea of like the expectation never really interested me. I just managed to land in it because it's wonderful, and I love my family and everything that I've got. But like, I also think that all the other things are cool too. If that's because one of my uncles, when he passed away, like he never had a family, never had anything. We don't know his sexual preferences. We don't know if he was just sexually asexual, or if he had preferences that he just didn't talk about. We don't know anything about, or maybe he could have been a guy that just had interest in those kinds of things or whatever. Like there are people who never have a traditional relationship, or that what we expect is traditional in our society. And I think those relationships and those lives are really cool too. I think they're just as valid and interesting. And like this video here, seeing this, like someone is rocking that out, and they're just like, whatever, I got my $300 stimulation tool. Like, I'm sure that thing's expensive as heck, man. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure it can't be cheap, but it like whatever. If that's your game, man, that's awesome.
Exactly. I don't know. Yeah, I always say whatever floats your boat. Probably not for me, but hey, if it's for you, more power to you.
Hell yeah.
This has been another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics podcast, brought to you by Patreons of all sorts, shapes, sizes, ethnicities, and those that love us.
I went to a comedy show with a Patreon this weekend. It was a great time.
Yeah, shout out to your Patreon friend. If you want to support us on Patreon, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Skeptics. You can also rate, like us, subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or any other podcatcher near you. We're looking to change up who we host with, but that'll probably be another 6 months away. So we'll see. You never know. Anyway, thank you all for joining us, and have another amazing week out there. Be kind, my friends. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker. CellarDoorSkeptics.com.
If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today, because we bring the discussion with the sources.